Oh, she removed group settings. Hold on. You have to now re-enable the I think I'm live on YouTube, but give us just a second. We're trying to get live on our Facebook support group. So just in case anyone happens to be on YouTube, which I highly doubt because we don't share that link, I just want to not sit here and be on my phone. Re-enable. I could probably do this just as quick. So while this is happening, Sharon, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take myself off camera and I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to fix the group settings and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and then let's go into the very first question, which is tell us about yourself and I will work on the group real quick.
Okay. All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Sharon Kyle. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I can't see any of you, so I'm actually talking to myself on a screen. But anyhow, hope I'm making good eye contact because anyway, yeah, I've been in private practice for about 24 years in Fullerton, California. Prior to that, I worked for WTLC, which is a nonprofit that assists women that were leaving intimate partner violence, domestic violence situations. And I worked in a shelter there. And then I worked for their outreach, running support groups for women that weren't ready to leave, but needed the extra support and guidance and advocacy, and ran groups for about 8 years for them. And I was a part-time professor at Cal State Fullerton, teaching some classes on child abuse and things. And here I am now in private practice. I've been focusing and mostly just specializing now in trauma therapy, EMDR therapy, because it does seem that that's at the heart of so many issues when people come to therapy, that I'd like to trace back to the earliest roots and see what we can resolve to help people get the most that they can out of therapy, the most healing they can get. Oh, I can't hear you, Cara. You're
because
muted.
I mute myself. We're just going to have every technical difficulty today happen from start. So while Sharon was introducing herself, you guys will be able to go back and watch this or read her bio. We are going to share it with you, so don't worry about all of that. But while Sharon was introducing herself, I had to go back into our private Facebook support group and re-enable the live stream settings. We're just checking off all the boxes, testing us on our whim. So thank you, Sharon. I'm thrilled that you're joining us today. Again, we're going to pretend like we didn't do the earlier introduction. And this episode is so important, not just to me personally, but really the support group from the members. We hear survivors who have gone through EMDR share their experiences with those who haven't. And so many people are curious about it because this is going to give them an opportunity to see a glimpse into it, coming from you directly in your calming tone and just how you present it. So the first question is the basic one. This episode is about EMDR. What does it stand for and what is it exactly?
Okay. So it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, because we found over time with research that rapid eye movement, like REM sleep, when you're rapidly moving your eyes while you're in a dream state, you can process things. And so if we duplicate that in a therapy session and have rapid eye movement going on in the safety of therapy, you can start to process and desensitize to trauma and then reprocess how it's stored in the brain. Because when it initially happens in that moment of shock, it tends to get stuck on one side and it loops. And that's why symptoms can go on for such a long time. And this helps undo the loop and help it process out so that people can have some relief.
I love that. Who would have thought of something like this is a genius, in my opinion, because I personally was stuck in that loop and they just said my panic button, my everything is on. It just doesn't know how to turn off. And having a tool out there that is harmless and safe is incredible. And I can't wait to get into this more. So for those of you watching, we do have some pre-submitted questions from our audience members as well as our volunteer group, but you are absolutely welcome to submit any question you want to Sharon. Put it in the comment section. Know that we won't see the name of who's submitting the question. It will say group member for your privacy, so you don't have to feel like anyone's going to question that. It is all anonymous, but go ahead and put that in the comment section and we'll make sure to answer it live on the screen for you. So with the next question, Sharon, it is, how do you know when it is time to start exploring therapy?
Okay. Well, I will say this, all of us experience anger, sadness, a blue mood, feeling down, feeling nervous and worried. And that doesn't always indicate clinical depression or clinical anxiety. We're all human and we're going to have the gamut of emotions. But if you find that that you're having, let's say, a bigger emotional reaction to a situation than is warranted, that often can indicate there might be something going on. Or if you feel like your emotional reactions to your daily life are bigger and getting unmanageable, that can indicate that therapy might be helpful. If people are bummed and sad for a couple of days, that's one thing. We're talking almost every day for a minimum of 2 weeks, staying in bed more, crying more, a variety of, things that look like depression or anxiety, or just knowing you've been carrying trauma a long time and you still sometimes feel triggered by that, or have, a bad dream about it, or have avoidance behaviors, don't want to go in a certain, let's say, area that reminds you of that scene. Things like that might mean it's time. If you know that your behaviors are getting in the way of your daily life, avoidance behaviors, depressed mood, things like that, and it's probably a good idea to come in.
Okay, so not just your regular I'm having a rough day or a sad day, when this is prolonged, that is, I think, the most important piece. And there's a lot of important pieces of that. So we're just gonna not summarize that down to something so small. But I do appreciate you mentioning that, because maybe somebody says, I'm depressed today, but is that the right term?
Yeah. Like, what's your baseline, right? Because obviously, I think therapy can help pretty much all of us at any time for a lot of things. So if you feel like you would like therapy, I'm all for that anyway. But but not everything is necessarily so problematic or diagnosable, which is good news. Sometimes we're just having a tough time, but it passes quickly. So it's mostly knowing yourself and how you're functioning.
I love that. So with that, how do you know when it's time to possibly start exploring a more intense level, if you will, if that's the right term? If it's not, please correct me, of therapy such as EMDR?
For the most part, most of the time, people do know they've been through something incredibly difficult that they've almost probably maybe never shared with anybody, or very, very few people. And they can just tell it's weighing on them. They might have avoidance. I see it a lot in the kind of work that I do. I see it a lot with childhood abuse, and then like avoiding intimate relationships as an adult. And they know that that's probably partly why. They know it's getting in the way of like the next natural step for them in their lives. It might be time for something like that. And there are people I've done EMDR on a woman that had been abused 50 years prior to our session, 50 years, and she still got full resolution of the trauma and didn't think that could happen. And it just was so sad she had to carry it that long, right? But she was so happy she did it. But when you're just feeling, you can tell when you're carrying something that you don't want to carry anymore. It's probably a good idea to look into that.
I think that is absolutely incredible. And thank you for sharing that about the woman that you helped, because we have a wide range of survivors in our group, and some have experienced a shorter time, but some have experienced longer. And I like that this can help either or. And it doesn't mean because you've carried it for 40, 50 years that there's not hope still. So that to me was just a beautiful thing that you just shared. And I'm hoping some of our support group members really feel that and connect to just that statement. Again, just a reminder to everyone in the private support group, your questions will come through anonymous, but if you have any question at all for Sharon about EMDR and how it could possibly help you heal, type it in the comment section. It will come up and we will go ahead and answer it live on screen. That's what this is all about. This is for you. So in the meantime, we'll go to the next pre-submitted question, which is, what are some of the biggest barriers to accessing trauma therapy, and what are some tips you have to work through them?
It seems to me the biggest barriers are generally the cost. It can be expensive. And so there's some financial constraints, or if people can use their insurance, if they have health insurance, they can look into their behavioral health benefits. That's usually a huge, huge help. And I know not everybody can do that. And the other problem I'm seeing a lot, especially once quarantine hit, when COVID first hit, is therapists have been swamped, and the waiting list are all over the place, it seems. And I've had so many people reach out telling me they've been looking and waiting. I had somebody circle back to me a year later. They've been waiting a whole year and still haven't found anybody. So that certainly happened as everybody got inundated, especially with telehealth becoming more common. People could do that right from home, which was phenomenally convenient. So that many more people were trying to access, which is great. And so having said that, though, you can Google low cost therapy, no cost therapy, online therapy sometimes is more affordable, things like that to get around some of those barriers. And I would say too, if you've decided you've found a therapist you really hope is the person you can work with and they're booked, if you're willing to wait, go ahead and get on the wait list and do check back and ask periodically every couple months and see if there's an opening or see if anything changed in their schedule. It's worth waiting sometimes if you can and if you have that option.
That kind of leads me into a question that is not on here, but I just thought of, and I think it was kind of posed by Hannah within our support group. There are a lot of people who mention EMDR is not covered on their insurance, but it's the piece of the pie that is what they're looking for next. Or some of the EMDR certified individuals don't take insurance. So what is there any option? Is there a grant? Is there anything people can do to possibly help fund this incredible resource?
Yeah. Okay. So I will say, I've been accepting variety of insurance panels for all the years, all the 20 some years. And I've actually never had an insurance not cover it because it's EMDR. They don't tend to I respect Hannah's experience and I'm sorry that even happened, if that happened to her or other people, other members. But generally, because it's confidential, they don't know if we're doing EMDR or not. It's just we're doing therapy in whatever capacity the client needs.
Okay.
Actually been stopped from billing insurance for that reason. Some will limit how many sessions you can have, and that does make it a little harder. But on the other hand, EMDR can somewhat work a little more rapidly, which helps. So, hopefully insurance would cooperate. But it's true. A lot of
things have changed over the last few years, right? I know when I first started EMDR, the only certified person in my area did not want to take insurance. And so I had out of pocket, and that was okay. I was luckily in a position to be able to do that, but not everyone is. So maybe it's the opposite, and it's the actual person not taking the insurance for whatever reason, and that's acceptable. Then there are these people who have the perfect blend for us, which is insurance, and our insurance approves it. So if you're not sure, I encourage you to get with your insurance carrier and ask, or get with your counselor, the certified counselor, and let them do the asking. If you're uncertain, that they have, I believe, a provider section of the insurance that they can call. So I'm hoping to resolve that.
I'm sorry. And just to say, to help people out in a pinch here, if you go on psychologytoday.com, you can click boxes that you want EMDR and you want certain, however many miles from home, and you have a certain insurance. And if you click boxes, it is hard to find, but there are some therapists that will come up that take insurance and EMDR, and you'll know it right up front. So
I love that.
Yeah.
We're going to recap this episode. I typically recap it within a week or two. I will try to do this one a little faster and be a little more efficient about it. But in that, we will include the Psychology Today link that you've mentioned and kind of a couple of screenshots so you can see, because I think that's an incredible thing that I didn't even know about. I absolutely love that. So I might go click in myself. That's amazing. All right, let's move on to the next pre-submitted question. Again, audience, if you have any questions for Sharon at all, go ahead and pop them in here. I'm going to continue with the ones that were submitted in advance. All right, Sharon, EMDR can seem overwhelming and confusing. Can you break it down for us in a way that feels more digestible?
Okay. Yes. I will say, as long, the therapist is going to be very aware that some people are nervous the first time they try it, so it's always helpful. The therapist will explain very well for you in detail how it works and why it works, and make sure you feel fully on board with giving it a try. You can also stop anytime you want. If you change your mind or you don't like it or you're uncomfortable and you decide this isn't for me, we stop. Nobody should be forced to do anything they don't want to do in therapy. You're aware and cognizant the whole time. It's not, hypnosis can be great, but I'm just saying it's not like hypnosis, and you're not unaware of what's happening. You're completely aware of what's happening, and you are in control the whole time as far as that goes of the process. And in therapy, we're going to break it down in very small steps. We're going to start with safety and relaxation and things to get you used to how it works. And then we're going to move into, early traumas if possible. And we take them one at a time. And in this, we really titrate and take it in very small segments to make it digestible and to make the whole thing feel doable. And what people start to find, though, is they have that release and they have that healing, and it starts, and then it gets easier to do the next one because now you've got some prior healing already and you know how it works. And then the next one feels a little easier, and then the next one. So
yeah, you get small wins along the way. So can you tell me, I'm sure we don't just jump right in the minute you meet me, but can you tell, I reach out to you and we're ready to, you're ready to take me on as your patient, and EMDR is my goal, but we're not going to start that minute one, are we? What does that look like as a new patient reaching out to Sharon?
Okay. Right. And so let's just assume we did the hello and meet and greet on the phone. And yes, please come on in. You come in. Most therapists are going to take a background history, an overview of things. Now, not everybody likes that. I mean, I'm very personally, I tend to be flexible that if people don't want to come in and do that right away, I don't make them do that. But it helps to just say the basics. Who grew up in your house with you, that kind of stuff. The basics. So we're getting a background, we're getting an overview, and we're coming up to one question I always ask in the first session is, if therapy does what you're hoping it will do, what will be different for you? How will you feel different inside, or how will your life look different if you get what you need in therapy? And so that's usually a good place to start and help people start, formulating their treatment plan with me. What are your goals? How do you, and sometimes people will say very often, I've been through some heavy stuff, and I'm not even ready to talk about it, let alone process it. That's fine. We start wherever the person is ready to start. So it's really getting to know each other, feeling safe, feeling connected, and learning more about their background and what they've been through as they feel comfortable. And I start to formulate as well in my own head. I'm keeping track too. And then in their notes, what looks like something, we call them targets in EMDR, what looks like a target that if we resolve that, it could help a lot. Right.
Okay.
And so we just start to create it together and go from there. And people can change their minds, skip this or add that, or come back to this later. It's okay.
Okay. So we had an incredible podcast episode that our very own Taylor hosted with you, and it was so informative, and I absolutely loved it. But for those who haven't listened, you did walk through in that podcast episode a little bit about exactly what happens with the EMDR, what you're doing, what the eyes need to do. And then I think you mentioned something with hands as well, because we might have some visually impaired individuals who need EMDR. So you do kind of a combination of both. And I'm clearly not using any technical terms here. So I'm going to let you explain a little bit about exactly what that looks like, and when we're doing, what are my eyes doing? What are you doing? And what is the hand about for those who are interested?
Okay. All right. And so what we found is, the whole point, it's called bilateral stimulation of the brain, BLS we call it. Bilateral is why EMDR works. So originally we found, yes, rapid eye movement is bilateral, and it's a left-right motion that is helping the brain process and release the trauma. But we've also found tactile bilateral works, which we call those hand pulsers or hand tappers. I have them in my office. I could probably show them to you, but you hold one in each hand and they vibrate like a cell phone. They do not shock you. They do not hurt you. They just vibrate, but it's still left, right. Or we auditory with sounds that alternate ears for people that would rather be hearing. And so we've got, a variety of options. If people are on telehealth, we have them tap on their legs, that it's instead of the vibration, obviously, or we can have them do eye movement on telehealth. So that's fine too. So the whole thing is, if it's a few sessions in, let's say you've come for 3 or 4 weeks or something, and we feel ready to start, we're going to have, after let's just say, do like what we call a safe space. And we always want to get you back to comfortable and safe at the end of the session. So we would have already established that. So for the sake of time, I'll just jump ahead. Let's just say then we're starting that. You get to pick if you want to do eye movement, hand tappers. I don't use sound personally. I'm not a fan, but it's an option. And then, we have a series of questions, and for the sake of time today, we probably don't. If you listen to the podcast, you'll hear probably more than you know about it. But, we ask a bunch of questions to help you zero in on that target. What do you remember? What was the worst moment? That stuff. What emotions do you feel? You'll notice a body trigger with unprocessed trauma. You will notice it when you think about it. Either your chest gets tight, or your stomach is in knots, or nauseous. A lot of times or clenching, there's a physical response in your body that tells us we're in the right place. And then we turn on the bilateral stimulation, and we only turn it on for a few seconds at a time, really. So your eyes are tracking for a few seconds, turn it off. I check in, turn it on, turn it off, check in. Same with the tappers. I'll turn on the vibration of the tappers, turn it off, check in. And we're checking to make sure you're still processing the trauma, that you're not maybe stuck in a particular spot. And if you are, then we'll nudge you through. It's
Okay.
like that. And we're constantly gauging if your distress is getting less and less the longer we do it. And what we
Okay.
find now, this part, I mean, EMDR isn't a magic bullet in one session for developmental trauma from childhood. It can be helpful for a one-time trauma like a car accident, but not
Okay.
necessarily for other kinds of trauma. But we're looking for the distress to go from on a scale of 0 to 10 down to a 0. And we're also trying to get what we call a clear body scan. So by the end of the session, are you noticing that your chest isn't tight anymore or your stomach is calm now? And that we see happen fairly rapidly. And that's amazing for people to say, wow, now when I think about the trauma, yes, it's distressing, but my body's not reacting like it was. And so
Mhm.
that's beautiful to see. And so that's the goal, is to continue until there's no distress and the body scan is clear. And the best kind of a really good part of that is undoing a negative belief you have about yourself as a result of the trauma, because we all tend to blame ourselves, carry a lot of shame. We end up carrying that throughout our lives, this negative belief about ourselves. And so with EMDR, we find out what that is. And as we process, that tends to also release. And then we work on replacing it with a positive belief that you can more readily believe now. And then we really know that we've probably processed it all the way. And that's a nice moment.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. While we're doing the eye movements or the hand, what am I speaking out loud as the patient? Am I sharing those thoughts with you, or those things that you're guiding me through, but they're in my own head? Do I have to be ready to speak about them to
You know
heal?
what? That's a great question, and I'm so glad you asked. Originally, the way it's designed is you don't have to talk much at all, and you still don't. I mean, that is the original way that this was all studied and researched, was when the bilateral is on, you get to be silent. And it's actually better. You can go deeper and you can really process silently better. And you don't ever, I've had people that don't want to tell me the worst moments of their trauma. That's absolutely fine, as long as they know what it was so that they can process it. But they don't have to tell me. As long as I know in general what we're working on, right? So I can make sure they're getting what they need. So yeah, people can process silently. People tend to cry fairly often in EMDR in such a cathartic, healing way. And that's fine, of course. So that's going on. So that's generally how it's set up originally. I will say, I have had some people, all of us as therapists have had people that want to talk as they process. And I think some therapists discourage it and some therapists don't. Personally,
Okay.
I don't tend to discourage that. I feel like people know what they need, and I haven't seen it hinder the process or the progress. And so I allow it. If people would prefer to process out loud during bilateral, then I let them do that.
I love that. That was one of my biggest concerns going in. I knew I was ready to try EMDR, but there were things that I would never let out. I just wasn't, and I still haven't, but that doesn't mean I haven't processed it more.
Right.
So it was
Mhm.
truly a safer space for me, because it wasn't just talk therapy, and I didn't have to give the darkness if I could just process it. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing that with our group. That to me is one of my favorite things about it. And I love that if you do need to let it out, that you're willing to have that. So we're going to go on to another question here from the pre-submitted ones.
Mhm.
Have you noticed changes in clients from the beginning to end of their EMDR journey? Hopefully in a positive way, but what changes have you noticed?
Yes. Well, it's funny because even, I mean, for the sake of anonymity, I'll keep it very vague. But just today, I had a client tell me that a trauma that happened to them on a particular holiday 27 years ago has bothered them on that holiday every year for 27 years until this year's holiday. And this
Wow.
year, she said, it didn't even cross my mind. She said, I didn't even think about it. So those are those moments where you're like, oh, I love this. I love waiting for people to get to heal, right? And so you find that people aren't having flashbacks. Of course, I'm talking very across the board, but everybody's got a different result. For the most part, you might find a reduction in nightmares, reduction in flashbacks, and or an elimination of those. Not avoiding certain things anymore if you don't have to. And the bigger things are no physical trigger in the body when you think about the trauma, and the negative belief about yourself is resolved. So you're not walking, you shed a lot of the shame and a lot of the regret or the fear, all the stuff that comes up when you think of the trauma gets resolved enough. So it's interesting what happens, and people say this, that the trauma seems fuzzy or far away after the EMDR is finished. They go, gosh, it used to be vivid. It used to be so vivid in my mind, and now I can barely see it. And it's sort of one of those things where it will always be an unfortunate fact in your history. It will never be good that this happened, but
Yeah.
it will have a neutral impact on your nervous system. It won't trigger your body, and it won't trigger your emotions anymore. You can look at it from a more neutral place moving forward and not feel, traumatized by it anymore. And so that's cool. And that's
Go ahead. I love that. So thank you for sharing that, because healing doesn't mean it's gone. It doesn't mean it's forgotten. It just means that you can live life with it, and it is not holding you back from living. And so has EMDR ever not worked because of EMDR, or is it more the client's just not ready to kind of take the step? So maybe it hadn't quite been able to do its job, if you will.
Yes, I would say, yes, there's going to be people that either don't feel that ready after all. I have had people that they know they want to do it. We start, but it was such an intense trauma that after that session, they come in and they keep coming in, but they're like, I'm not ready to do it again yet. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And I'm never, okay, then, let's be gentle and patient and wait. So some people get afraid of having to go really deep into that feeling, which I understand. And so we're trying to just wait that out. Some people just, for whatever reason, decide they're not ready after all and don't want trauma therapy. I think if it's being done true to form, people tend to find at least some relief. It's a pretty rare situation where somebody tried it and got nothing. That's pretty, I feel like that's rare, but it's probably, but I can't say it's impossible. So,
okay, that's fair. And I like that earlier you mentioned that it's not just a one shot. You do it once and it's done, because healing is a journey.
Right.
So is there and this is a question I've seen come up, not necessarily in the support group, just in life with my friends, with family. Is there an average healing time with EMDR? Is there this? Well, is it different for every person? I mean, is there a target range for you that you're hoping to help me by, or is it just every small win matters? Can you kind of talk about how long my journey might be? Because people, it does feel overwhelming sometimes in those moments.
Okay. Gosh, there's so much to that question, so I'll try to do it justice. I would say a one-time trauma, as I mentioned, maybe like a car accident, if there's no violation of trust, those kinds of traumas you can resolve, I would say, very quickly. 1 to 4 sessions, you could probably resolve the whole trauma and move on. If you were afraid to drive, you'll be okay, and we can get you through that with high confidence. We can get you through that. Okay, but that's not what most people come in for. Most people come in for what we look at as developmental trauma, complex trauma, and that involves a violation of trust by a very close family member, generally, or friend or relative somehow. And that violation of trust is such a big deal. And so and that means, that implies there are layers to the trauma. It probably wasn't once. It probably went on for years in a variety of ways, whatever it was. And for that reason, it does take longer. We just have more to cover, more to process, so it takes longer. I've had somebody with an intense childhood that's been doing EMDR every week. He's very brave. He'll do it every week, and he goes deep. But he's been doing it every week for 4 years because there's so much, and that's a very extreme example. But I would say typically we look at short-term therapy as like 3 to 6 months, medium therapy 6 months to a year. We look at long-term therapy to take about 2 years, if not longer. I personally feel if we do it right and we do it thoroughly, and you're coming in with a lot of developmental trauma, you should probably expect it could take a couple years. Not always, and sometimes longer. It just really depends what you're working on. There's just so much variety to that.
Yeah. I appreciate the honesty in that. And I really think it's important for people to know that it is a journey and there's no right or wrong length of time. But something that you mentioned earlier that I want to repeat is that each session, you may not have resolved everything, but each session you feel a little lighter and a little lighter so it helps you come back because of those small wins along the way. So work for those accomplishments and celebrate those is what I would hopefully expect everyone to be doing. But how important is it to celebrate those small wins along the journey?
Oh, huge. It's huge. Absolutely. And I'm glad you highlighted that because it's very true. I mean, I'm sure it sounds like, oh man, every week for a couple of years, forget it. But really, truly, there's this healing going on. It is taking place. Otherwise, people wouldn't be motivated to come back. I wouldn't, you know, but it's because they know it's helping, you know, and people are saying, I'm sleeping for the first time in years. I'm sleeping through the night for the first, you know, whatever. They're finding some symptoms are going away or that they're handling things differently or better. Life is getting better through, I mean, you know, I don't want to oversell. It's still a painful process. It's trauma therapy, but you see enough progress that it is motivating. Most people wish they'd found it years ago, and most people wish they'd started a long time ago.
I like that you said that, you know, you don't want to oversell and it is a painful process, but it's painful to live with it. So choose your pain. Do you want to go through the painful process and try to get a little better? Or do you just want to try to deal with the pain and not ever get better? And I think that's the most important thing that I think about all the time. You choose your hard. Which is the hardest part? Do you want to live like this, or do you want to maybe make it a little less hard in a week and then a little less harder? So I appreciate you mentioning that because it is not easy to go through. No one's saying it's easy. It is brave. It takes courage. But it also is not easy to live with it. So
Exactly.
I recommend that. So we have one more question. This 30 minutes flew by, even though we started late, it just still flew by. I'm going to ask the question, but just last time for anyone who is watching, if you have anything that you'd like to ask Sharon, please put it in the comments below. We will see it. And if for some reason you're watching this back live and you realize a question was not answered, feel free to type it into the comment section. The volunteers will pull those comments together and we will get them over to Sharon, and I'm sure she will either respond back in an email, or we can get her for another live when we have less technical difficulties and we're more structured and we're ready to run. So the last question for you today, Ms. Sharon, is in addition to therapy, what are other ways and things folks can incorporate in their lives to continue along their healing journey?
Okay. I would say the two most important things, if you want to see a real impact in how much it's helping you, I would say it's staying socially connected to other people, especially after all that's gone on with COVID. This lack of social connection, social anxiety is higher than ever. People are staying home more than ever. They are declining invitations more than ever. You know, getting connected socially again with your peer group, finding that will take you very, very far. It's incredibly healing. It's just good for all of us. And exercise, anything. Just take a brisk walk or walk in a park, get around nature. Get outside and be in nature. But I'm not talking you have to be at the gym 7 days a week, but just moving your body. So is very, very good for you. And of course, things like relaxation. There's so many great, you know, and meditation. There's so many great apps now, Headspace and Calm and, you know, all of that stuff, Insight Timer. If you can make that kind of time to sit quietly and, you know, I like guided meditation better. Some people don't talk about this enough, but there are people that feel triggered to anxiety when they try to meditate. It's not safe to sit quietly with their body. And I get that. And so I understand. It sounds like a quick fix and it's not. So I'm all for guided meditation. Let a voice walk you through. Why not? There's tons of that online, tons of it. So, you know, a guided meditation is nice with music and a soothing voice telling you what to do next is great. Exercise and social connection will really take you far.
I appreciate that so much. Now, the last thing about you, Sharon, you practice out of California and you do telehealth visits, correct?
Yes.
Do you do telehealth visits for anyone outside of the state, or is it primarily California based?
That's a good question. It's, you know, CAMF, the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, they've been fighting this for years. At the moment, we're still not allowed to practice out of state.
Okay.
But if I have a current client that happens to go out of state briefly for a vacation, then I'm allowed to do telehealth while they're on their trip. But generally, we have to practice with people that are in the state. That's not, though, true for PhDs, I think, psychologists and stuff. I think they're allowed to. So if you look for that, if they have EMDR as part of their toolkit, they could do it.
So any of our members that are in California that are interested, Sharon's will share her website. But if you're outside of California, we will obviously include the Psychology Today link to make sure you can find a therapist near you, find an EMDR specialist near you. Sharon, we're going to close out here in just a second. And when I do end this broadcast, I'm going to ask you to stay on for a little bit so I can collect those. So don't close out your window right away. But is there anything else you'd like to add that you want to share with the support group before we just end this lovely chat that we're having?
Just, you know, keep up the fight, keep moving forward the best you can, and always hold on to your value inside. Remember who you are. Remember the strength that you have, the strength that you've had to get through what you've already been through. And that is sort of similar to what Cara said earlier. It's a different kind of hard. Staying is hard. Leaving can be dangerous. But once you've left, it's a different kind of hard, but it's a very liberating, freeing kind of hard that you feel so proud of and so good about, and you reclaim your life and your future. So there are people out here that really want to help you on that journey, and it's worth it. It's worth it.
I'm going to just cut that little video and that audio clip and replay it for people a lot, because I think that was powerful in itself. So thank you. We're going to go ahead and end this session, and we will be in touch with you soon with a recap.
Thanks, everybody.